So, hello everyone, and remember that video about the GTX 580 DirectCO2 where I promised to hardmod it, and apart from deleting it, it never materialized? Well, I have something for you. This is my very first, which I call a hard mod. So this right here, it is not the 580 DirectCO2, and it is not the sort of hard mod that I was speaking about. But it is a hard mod, my first hard mod, and it is working. So people who know stuff about hard modding GPUs will immediately know what this is. This is a voltage sense line for VCore that I implemented on this. This is the MSI GTX 560 Ti 448. This card is non-functional at the moment, though the core and the VCore VRM, like all the VRMs and the core are working. It's the memory chips that have problems. So this is a perfect test subject for my first steps into hard modding. So this is, yeah, as I've said, it is a VCore sense line, and basically how it works is I can show you on the other card that has my second mod on it. So this is the back of the GPU core, and you can see all those little SMD capacitors here. And those capacitors are a pretty good spot to measure VCore. You can go to a capacitor with your multimeter and then measure which side of the capacitor is ground, which is VCore, and maybe even check if it is a VCore capacitor, because there can also be there could also be a VMEM capacitor in that region, and on AMD cards there could also be a VDDCI capacitor. So you gotta check if it's a VCore capacitor through just resistance check. And yeah, so then you can solder one wire to the ground side and one wire to the VCore side of a capacitor, or two capacitors as I've done it here. And then if you attach some wires, you can then hook them up to your multimeter, and you will get a very precise measurement for your VCore. And it will be much better than you just measuring from the inductors and the, like if you take your multimeter and measure from the inductor output to your ground pin on the PCI Express, because when the voltage travels from the VRM to the core, it has to go through the power plane, and the power plane has resistance, and that means your voltage will drop. And it could drop up to 100 millivolts, and say you will measure 1.3 volts here, but your core will actually only have 1.2 volts. That's why you do such a mod. And it's also like it's permanent, and you don't have to hold your multimeter probes to the PCB all the time. So that's also a convenience thing. And as I've done it here, it is a very basic implementation of it. And yeah, so basically, like these two capacitors, like it's a mirrored design basically. Two of these capacitors are also under there, and I soldered onto them. And yeah, so the black line is ground, the red line is VCore, and I soldered onto them, and then I put a blob of hot glue there to not make them come off. I didn't have plasti dip, so that's why I used a hot glue, and then I took my adding and painted it a bit because it looked awful. It still looks awful, but it looks less awful. And yeah, so ideally you would like to put a resistor on one of the wires, because if I would accidentally short those together, or have the two connection points here touch each other, I would short VCore to ground, and whatever the VRM will output, which can be hundreds of amps, will travel through those tiny little wires. And yeah, you will have a bad time. Like your wires will very likely melt, and if you are unlucky, you will damage some capacitors or the GPU core itself, and then it's just game over for the card. So that's why you would ideally like to put a resistor, like 5 kilo ohms, to one of the lines. So the power, so not every single amp in your VCore VRAM will go through your voltage sensor circuit. The thing is just I didn't have a resistor on hand for me, so I gotta be extra careful not to short these together. But I have tested them and they work. So yeah, and I also did it not like everyone else does it. Like you can see, I have these two very short wires attached to them, which then have an open end where I can use my clamps here and put them on. Normally you would just run a longer wire and then terminate them somewhere where you would then put your multimeter probes in, but I just so happen to have a lot of these wires on hand, so I thought I'm gonna put them to use. And this also, like, I can also then quickly change between cards if I do more of these, which I will do. So yeah, so you just take these cables and clamp them onto there. And the good thing is the clamps are also isolated, so I don't know how well you're gonna be able to see that. But when these like come together, they never really touch. The metal never really touches, which is good. Which is basically extra added security. So these don't accidentally short, because like if you saw my Ryzen test bench video, you will see that my test bench is not a usual test bench where the motherboard is just flat on the desk. I have it in a normal case, and then my graphics cards go into a vertical mount, which means that I won't be able to see the back side of the card when it's installed, and those cables can wiggle around. And so having these, this bit of isolation is pretty nice, so I don't accidentally short them. And the next time I do this, I should just make one of the cables longer, so they can come even that close together. Or I'm just gonna make them flat, and one goes to this direction, the other one goes to this direction. At the moment it's just straight up from the back of the core, because I didn't really think about that at the time I was putting it on. And I'm also gonna be showing some footage. I recorded some of the process of me putting on the mod, and then checking with my with my multimeter here if I created a short or not. And yeah, so this is my first hard mod, and it is working. It is, yeah, it is working fine. And yeah, so I didn't even have to use this non-functioning card, because I think I pulled it off rather successfully for it being my very first hard mod. It's even almost the first time. I only soldered once before this, and that was like a PC fan with a proprietary connector, which I just wired up to a random 12-volt power supply that I found from an old printer, I think. So I can just plug that fan into the wall and have it standing on my desk to have a fan on my desk. And yeah, so this is only the second time like that I can remember that I soldered, actually. And I think it went rather well. So yeah, I also wasn't using, like, I just ordered a soldering iron, and it hasn't arrived yet, so I used the really, really old one from my father. Like, the cables of that soldering iron are really, really messed up, and several, like, on several occasions that cable seemed to be defective, and it was just fixed, and it looks really janky. It is a 50-watt iron, so it is weaker than the 75-watt iron that I ordered, but like, if you want to desolder like something like this, like through-hole inductors, you're gonna need 150 watts. But I don't plan to do an e-power anytime soon, so 75 watts will be plenty for what I plan to do. So yeah, this is the VCore voltage sense hard mod, and yeah, I'm actually, like, it was a lot of fun modding this card, even though it's not working. Like, it had artifacts all over the place because the memory is, one of the modules is faulty. And yeah, so first hard mod, and because I just couldn't stop myself, I also made a second one, which involves the GTX 470. So you can see already I soldered something to the power connectors. And what was my plan, basically, for this card is like, the core is, don't know if you can see it, it is physically detached from the PCB in this edge and in this edge, and I also think in this one. So the core is, like, the core itself is probably fine, but the connections under the core, like the BGA connections, these are completely scrambled and broken and yeah, not working. Then also I removed the VMEM inductor because I noticed that, I don't know why, it was from one day to another, the resistance from VMEM to ground went from 64 ohms to 1 ohm. So these are not quite shorted together, but the resistance is a lot lower than it should be, so I just removed that inductor. The VRM is probably still working, but somewhere behind the inductor there seems to be a short. And yeah, so basically everything that's left on this card is the VCore VRM, which is still working perfectly fine. And you can see I removed some of the solder mask to reveal the VCore power plane. And basically what I'm planning to do here is convert the VCore VRM of this here card to a power board, which I can use just like, I will have a 4-phase VRM which I can just use for whatever. Like, once I mod the PWM controller, I also looked into that one. Like, if I had the fitting potentiometers and resistors and the new soldering iron, because the old one has a bigger tip, I could do a feedback mod. I looked in how to do it, and I think I know how to do it without blowing stuff up. So I could feedback mod this PWM controller and then have full control over the voltage that this VRM puts out. So I could just have a 4-phase VRM which I can just use for whatever. And yeah, one thing that annoyed me is, like, I'm not sticking this card into my test system because I had it in there once after it died, and it really caused some problems. Like, my system wouldn't boot up anymore, CPU would be unstable, RAM would be unstable on previously stable settings, GPUs wouldn't run, and yeah, it caused all sorts of weird issues, so I'm not sticking this into my main system again. I do have a very old Core 2Do system with a proprietary motherboard from Dell, I think. And yeah, and the power supply for this system only has one 6-pin power connector. And considering, like, this power board will never power a VCore VRM because this 4-phase is not good. Like, it might e-power a VMEM or VDDCI once, and you can just use one 6-pin for those rails. So I just soldered that stuff together, so you only use one 6-pin, and I tested it. The card does now fire up with only one 6-pin. And yeah, previously I did not have all the, like, it's a little bit wrong because the black ones are 12 volts and the red ones are ground, so I switched those around. So the 12 volts cable weren't shorted together before. I just did that because the connections were not that good, and I mean internally all the 12 volts are shorted together anyways, so I just shorted those together too. And then on the ground side I pretty much just lost my patience to attach all the wires to the individual solder bobs, so I just put on 2 wires and just shorted everything together. and the VCore powers up, like it does run like this, even though those are not shorted together internally. So I put one 6-pin connector in, I put it into the core to duo system, and I measured from the back of the core if we have a voltage, and yes, we did get about 800-900 millivolts, which is just the voltage that the card boots up on. So the VCore VRM is working. So yeah, this is the second hard mod, like just bypassing the, like it could have been done very, very more simple, because I would only have to bypass the like the middle one, I think, is the sense line, and if there's not a, if there's not a connector present on that line, that tells the card that there is no connector, and I would only have to short that one to ground, and the card should boot up. But I actually don't know if the two 6-pins have, like, if they have individual power planes, or if the or if both connectors go into one power plane. So I just connected every single one together, and I mean, it's like, it can't make it worse. It's just more work for me. As long as it still works, it's pretty much, yeah. So I just got to solder some more, which, I mean, yeah, I mean, it probably was good practice. Like, if you can see here, those blobs come quite a little bit too close for comfort sometimes. So I think I will need some more practice for soldering until I can solder to my 780 Ti's, 980 Ti's, or my Lightning 580, because I really don't want to break those. So far I haven't broken anything yet with my soldering skills, but who knows, the mods I've done for now are very, very simple. Once I try to do a feedback mod, or just any kind of volt mod, that will be like the next tier or in difficulty, because that one requires much more precise soldering, and yeah, also requires that I solder on resistors, potentiometers, and yeah. So yeah, until my stuff arrives, I can't really do anything, any more stuff. And yeah, I could do one thing. I could just salvage some of the capacitors here, but actually, yeah, I would like to keep those because I want the VRM still working. Maybe I can find some other old components in the attic or somewhere where I can salvage some capacitors and Hardmod this card, because this one still fires up. It just artifacts all over the place, and it can't install the driver. So I won't be able to see what difference an overclocking my Hardmods would make, but I could check if I do them correct, because if I do them incorrect, the capacitors will blow up. So yeah, I could practice some Hardmodding. And what I could also do is, like, I highlighted the output lag of the VCore inductors. Maybe I could do a power bridge. Like, I could check my multimeter right here. Let's just check on the core, those little capacitors over here, which side is ground. Oh yeah, that is good. That is very good. That is very good. So the side of the of these capacitors facing the VCore VRM, those are also VCore. So I could do a power bridge from the inductors to those two capacitors, and maybe what's with the larger one? Okay, that's not VCore. Okay, whatever that is not VCore. Or No, it is VCore. Okay, so I was measuring something wrong. Yeah, but that one has the ground. Yeah, that's rotated in an inconvenient way. Yeah, so, but those two capacitors, they have VCore on the side facing the VCore VRM. I would just have to... I will just have to be careful with the even smaller capacitors that are in front of them, like these really small ones here. I think I'll have to put something over them, like, I don't know if a bunch of tape is resistant enough to the heat of the soldering iron, but I don't want to short those out. Like, if one of those blows up because I shorted, that will be really nasty. Really, like, such a small cap, it's probably not enough to blow a hole into the PCB, but I would still have to replace it, and yeah, caps this small, not really in the mood for that. So yeah, if I'm bored enough, I might decide to improvise a power bridge. It doesn't really do anything, but it is more of soldering practice, which I need. So yeah, I might do even more pointless modifications to this non-functioning card. But yeah, so the entire point of this video was basically I'm delivering on the hard mods. I finally got myself to start properly hard modding, getting out the soldering iron, and telling Nvidia who's boss. Apparently Nvidia still, because my mods haven't achieved anything until now. But yeah, so I can do hard mods, yeah, so that's pretty much it. And yeah, when my stuff arrives, I have a bunch of stuff actually coming my way, because there are a lot of shipping delays. Like, I ordered a bunch of stuff on several occasions, and none of that has arrived. The only thing that arrived is the pump press combo for my custom water loop, which is uploading right now actually. Yeah, but I have a bunch of stuff coming our way. So I have 2 fittings coming for the pump press combo to replace the janky ones that I'm reusing right now. I have 4 EK VADA 2200 RPM fans, 2 of which go to the Morpheus, 2 of which go through the radiator of the custom loop. And then I also have another bunch of orders actually, from eBay, because I found a GTX 780 Ti matrix on eBay. It's not a platinum, sadly, though that guy was also selling a 290X platinum, but yeah, I'd rather have a 780 Ti because I love 780 Ti's. And yeah, so my Zotac 780 Ti was kind of a letdown. Didn't scale with voltage, only scaled a bit with cooling. Like, going from the stock cooler to custom water cooling gave me like 20 megahertz maybe, so really bad. So I'm hoping that a matrix, which is like a proper overclocking card for a 780 Ti, will scale better. It's not a platinum, so the core might not be that good, but the PCB is definitely a lot better than the reference PCB of the Zotac card. So yeah, I have that coming. Then like, yeah, I have the soldering iron coming, which is like an Ursa PTC something, I don't know. It's a 75 watt iron, and it has variable heat output, so I can tell it how hot it's gonna get. Like, if I do smaller work, I don't need the full 75 watts, because the 50 watt iron that I was using today already was pretty hot. And yeah. And then some more stuff. 2 cards. One of which is going to me. One of which is going to my friend who sent me the GTX 480 and the HD 7950. And both of these cards are HD 7770s gigahertz editions. Like mine's Sapphire, his one is Gigabyte, I think, but the PCBs are the same. And basically what I got my friend into is, like, we will order these HD 7770s. And my cat wants out of the room, which I locked because I don't want to disturb anyone with my recordings. Well, she's gotta wait a few more minutes. Yeah, so HD 7770s, really simple PCB, easy to mod, as I've heard, great with voltage, like scale with voltage, and those are really cheap, like 20-25 euros, those one of those things. And yeah, so the plan is, me and my friend, we get 2 identical PCBs, and we start modding them, like doing mods like this, like a VCore voltage sense thing, which is like the entire stuff that I did today. Now my cat is jumping onto my... Hey! Cats on YouTube videos are free views, right? Yeah, come on. Yeah, there she is. She wants my attention because she wants out of the room. Yeah. So, yeah, HD 7770. Me and my friend, we will do, like, we will mod them, and the way I got him to agree is because all of these cards have the same PCB, at least the 2 that we ordered have the same PCB. We can do the identical mods to our cards, and also like Bullzoid from Actually Hardcore Overclocking, which, like, I mention him in pretty much every video, and in the other video you were able to see that I own a piece of merch from him, so obviously I'm a fan. Yeah, so he made a video also modding an HD 7770. It wasn't a gigahertz edition PCB, but it was, like, it's basically the same thing, where he did all the mods to that card. So we have at least one point of reference as to what we should do. And yeah, so we can mod our cards and then basically do a competition at the end, which one, who of us gets the better implementation of their mod, so who can overclock higher. And yeah, so that'll be fun. It might take some time until we actually do the hard mods, because my friend said he would like to do it together with me, like together in a room. And until he can visit me, that might take some time, because, like, the world is still on lockdown. But until that happens, we can just bench them without hard mods, try to, like, maybe do something in software, try cooling solutions, and yeah. But I'm rambling far too much right now, so I think I'm gonna end it here. I'm gonna let my cat out of the room. It was probably not that delighted right now. So yeah. So my first 2 hard mods, both of them have been successful. They are pretty easy, to be fair, but nevertheless I pulled off 2 hard mods. They work, and I'm excited for doing more of those, because it was really fun to make them, actually. Like, I really enjoyed the time I had while making these. So yeah, this is it for the update video. Or actually, in the end it turned into an update video, but it was more of meant to show off that I can indeed pull off hard mods, and I'm not just making empty promises. And yeah, so hope you enjoyed, and until next time, bye.